This is Module A5, Neural Tissue. And in Objective 1, we're going to look at the anatomical and functional divisions of the nervous system. Anatomically, we can divide the nervous system into two parts. We have the central nervous system that is dominated by the spinal cord and the brain. And we have the peripheral nervous system, which would be any nervous tissue outside of the spinal cord and brain. So here in this figure, you see all of the nerves as they run through the body. This would all be considered peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system not only contains the nervous tissue associated with the brain and the spinal cord, but also includes all the connective tissues and blood vessels that help support the brain and spinal cord. And the functions of the central nervous system include sensory data, so it receives sensory data, conditions both inside and outside of the body. So, for example, it would perceive temperature from outside the body. It coordinates and sends motor commands, and this will control things like skeletal muscles. And the central nervous system also handles all of the higher functions of the brain, including our memory, our ability to learn, emotions, as well as the intelligence. The peripheral nervous system, on the other hand, functions to deliver that sensory information to the central nervous system. And it kind of serves as a two-way highway. It's going to, if this were your brain and your spinal cord, the peripheral nervous system is going to deliver information to the brain and spinal cord, such as, let's say you were to put your hand on a hot plate. You have thermoreceptors within the integument of your hand that will sense that change in temperature, and it's going to send a signal to the brain, basically indicating that a change in temperature has occurred. The brain is going to process that information, and it's going to send a signal via the peripheral nervous system to the muscles of the arm, and that's basically going to cause a contraction to remove your hand from that hot plate before damage can occur. And this information process, both the sensory information that travels to the brain and the motor command that follows, that is going to direct the skeletal muscle to contract and the movement of the hand. This all happens very quickly. We're talking milliseconds. Again, you can't imagine this system taking any amount of time because of the damage, potential damage that could occur with you putting your hand on a hot plate. So this all occurs in milliseconds. This actual example, the hand on the hot plate, is a reflex, and we'll talk about reflexes later in this module. But again, this kind of illustrates both the sensory as well as the motor commands that are associated with the peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system is composed largely of nerves. These are referred to as peripheral nerves. And these are bundles of axons. If you remember axon from lab, this is that very long process off the neuron. So the nerve is bundles of axons with connective tissue and blood vessels, kind of all bound together. And again, these nerves will carry sensory information as well as motor commands. It's carrying sensory information to the central nervous system, and it's going to carry motor commands to the body via the PNS. Cranial nerves are those nerves that actually connect to the brain, and we'll look at these in lab. There are 12. And spinal nerves are nerves that are attached to the spinal cord. When we look at the functional divisions of the peripheral nervous system, we can define afferent division versus the efferent. The afferent is the sensory division, so this is going to carry sensory information from the peripheral nervous system to the central nervous system. So this is heading towards the brain. This is the afferent division. The efferent division is our motor division, and this is going to carry motor commands from the central nervous system to the body. So the peripheral nervous system can be divided into both afferent and efferent divisions. When we consider the afferent division, we can identify structures as being either receptors or effectors. Receptors are the specialized nervous system components that detect changes or respond to stimuli. And just to give some examples, the eyes detect changes in light, while the ears will detect changes in sound, sound vibrations. These are all receptors, and they can be very complex, such as the ears or eyes. But if you remember back looking at when we covered the integument in Module A2, we discussed Merkel cells. And if you remember, Merkel cells are found in basically hairless skin, and they respond to touch. So these are all receptors. They help perceive the environment. Effectors are the structures that respond to those efferent signals. So these tend to be cells and other organs. Anything that's going to respond to the efferent signals would be referred to as effectors. So those were sort of categories of the afferent. We're now going to focus on the efferent. The efferent division can be divided into the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. The somatic nervous system controls skeletal muscle contraction. You should always think that the skeletal muscle equals somatic. Okay? These reflexes can be both voluntary and involuntary, and ultimately leads to muscle contraction. I know in the past we've talked about all skeletal muscle is voluntary. What this is referring to is the involuntary reaction due to reflexes. And again, we'll discuss reflexes in more detail in a bit. But just to give you a leeway, if you were to trip, you have skeletal muscles that automatically, involuntarily react to help catch before you fall. So this is what we refer to when we write involuntary reflexes. The other division is the autonomic division. And autonomic is subconscious. The contraction of both the smooth and cardiac muscles, as well as any of the glandular secretion. This is all controlled under the autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system, again, is divided into the sympathetic and the parasympathetic divisions. The sympathetic division has a stimulating effect, while the parasympathetic has a relaxing effect. So these two systems are antagonistic. they work against each other. One is going to stimulate, and the other one is going to induce relaxation.